So hello everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about my research project. So I'm a third year PhD student, just beginning my third year at Paris State University, and I'm supervised by Clément de Doncel, Julie Lochard, and Philippe de la Côte. And my research subject is soybean international trade and deforestation, but today I will talk more about my first chapter. All right. Yes. So, about between 29 and 39% of deforestation is embedded in international trade. In fact, that's why studying international trade, like imported deforestation, is quite important quantitatively when you want to study deforestation. So yes, because this is a main driver of deforestation. The second reason why it's important to study imported deforestation is that some might think that trade could be, in fact, a lever to slow down deforestation. So, for instance, at the French level, we have the French national strategy, zero imported deforestation, and at the European level, there are discussions to implement some bans on commodities containing deforestation. So here, we want to try to understand the link, how international soybean trade relates to the Brazilian deforestation. And I have 3 chapters. So I just finished about the first one, and these 2 others are in progress. But we have like from upstream to downstream. So first, we want to consider what are the export decision and the production decision of soybean in relation to deforestation. Then we study what are the network effects of the soybean trade and how it's related to deforestation. So are there any lock-in effects due to these network effects that could endanger the efficiency of forest conservation policies? And finally, we study how the foreign demand for meat is a driver of deforestation. So it fits quite well in the Sealand project because it could bring some information to define some pathway to mitigate climate change through a better forest management. And more especially in challenge 3, the condition and research line 3, the conditions for kickstarting the transition. So how can trade be a brake or lever to have cleaner supply chain and mitigate climate change? And also because we study the competition between different roles of land, so agricultural production and also storage of carbon and a reserve of biodiversity in forests. All right, so let me tell you more about my first chapter, which studies the impact of a policy on the soybean sector. So this is not released yet, but there is a working paper if you want to read it. So this paper is entitled "Do Forest Conservation Policies Undermine the Soybean Sector in the Brazilian Amazon?" And this is an evidence from the blacklisting of municipalities. So there is a burning need to tackle deforestation, and one of the main means to tackle deforestation is to implement local forest conservation policies. But some might fear that it could endanger the development of some countries, especially for the countries that have heavily based their development strategies on agricultural production and exports. So there could be some trade-offs between agricultural production and forest conservation. So we focus here on Brazil because there are few better countries than Brazil to study the interaction between agricultural production for exports and forest conservation. And we focus on a measure, and we focus on the community soybean also because this is an enormous source of revenue for Brazil, and also a direct and mostly indirect source of deforestation. So we studied the blacklist, which was implemented in 2008 in the Brazilian Amazon. And we wonder what are the impacts of these forest conservation policies on the soybean sector. So where the production and export is undermined by the blacklist, how do agricultural production and productivity respond to these forest conservation measures, and what parameters influence the land use responses to forest conservation policies? So we are not the first to have a look at this policy, because it was quite efficient, in fact, to reduce the deforestation rates, as it was shown by many authors. But maybe the collateral impacts of the blacklist on agriculture are less clear. So some authors show that there was an increase in the cattle production and in the productivity of the livestock sector, but there were not clear effects on crops. Also, considering trade, some other papers looking at other forest conservation policies show that sometimes there are substitution between domestic markets and international markets when forest conservation policies are implemented. So we contribute to this literature by looking deeper into this. So yes, what is the blacklist? The blacklist, it was launched. This is a measure of a broader plan called the Action Plan for Monitoring and Control of the Brazilian Amazon. And it aimed at imposing special command and control measures in the most vulnerable municipalities about deforestation. So here on this map, in red, you have the municipalities that were blacklisted in 2008. So to be blacklisted, there were several criteria. So they were the ministry was considering the total area deforested, also the total area deforested in the last 3 years, and the increase of deforestation. And this list, in fact, evolves with the patterns of deforestation. So there was a first wave in 2008, and then another wave in 2009, another in 2011, and you can be removed from the blacklist if you prove that you had tremendous progress in your municipality. The measures toward them was that they were a more intense monitoring. So the resources of the environmental police were more dedicated to these municipalities. The alerts, when there was an alert, satellite alert, the police would go first in the blacklisted municipalities. Also, there were some embargoes of the properties, the farms that were producing, that were deforesting. The local governments also pushed the farmers to georeference their properties, and there were also credit restrictions for farmers wanting to deforest. Also, some sustainable development plans would accompany these restrictive measures. So there were like really different deforestation rates between the two groups, the blacklisted municipalities in the plain lines and the control municipalities that I use in the dotted line. And a big, yes, decline in deforestation rates. So we want to know what happens when, yes, at the forest frontiers with these conservation policies about the massive soybean expansion. Did it continue? Did it halt? We don't know. The characteristics of the soybean sector are that this sector requires a very high level of investments for fertilizer, for pesticides, for machinery, and a high number of supporting services and secure land rights. And it's also quite linked to deforestation, even though there was a decoupling after the soil moratorium. So what do we do? The first step is to construct panel data from 2004 to 2012. So we have as outcomes deforestation rates and also some variables about the agricultural production and yields, and also the exports of soybean and other types of land use, these such as pastures. We also have a set of controls to control for differences between municipalities, like protected areas or yes, the parties, things like that. And we study also heterogeneous effects on the municipalities using agroclimatic conditions, the presence of supply chain infrastructures, or how is developed the trade network. So this is our sample. We have in total 161 municipalities. I do not use all the municipalities of the legal Amazon, which is inside the red line, because I remove the municipalities that do not produce soybean, also the municipalities that do not have much forest cover. So we have quite similar municipalities with the treated municipalities in red and the other municipalities in gray. So we want to know the differences between the two groups, the control group and the treated group. To do that, we use a classical technique in econometrics, which is the difference in difference. So basically, if we have the same trend between the two groups before the implementation of the policies, the effect of the treatment would be the change of trend after the implementation of the policy in the treated group. So we want to evaluate like this study, which is right before the interaction between the fact of being treated and whether it's before or after the implementation of the policy. We also had some treatment effects, municipality fixed effects, and your fixed effects to account for the differences of, I don't know, like slopes, like fertility between municipalities, and also differences between the years, and also some covariance. So the main assumption is to have parallel trend before the implementation of the policy. So the issue is that we have quite different groups, in fact, because they were not chosen randomly, the municipalities. It's quite endogenous. So what do? We first run some placebo tests to check whether we have a parallel trend before the implementation of the policy. And we have no evidence supporting different pre-treatment trends. So this is reassuring. But we also use another method to have more robustness, which is called the generalized synthetic control method. So the principle is to compute synthetic control municipalities based on covariance, based on some variables of the control groups. So you weight the municipalities and their characteristics to control a fixture's comparable municipality for each of the treated municipalities. And we end up with similar results, so it's okay. So yes, but this is only when we have, so for that, I only selected the first wave of municipalities treated in 2008. But as I told you, the list evolves through time. So I wanted to check whether there were differences across the groups, and what are also the short-term and the long-term effects of the policies. And to do that, I use another kind of estimators of Callaway and Santana to account for these differences. So what are the results? First, on deforestation, we find that there was a decrease in deforestation rates of 41%. So this is in line with the previous literature. But we were a bit surprised because there was an increase in soybean and also in soybean exports. So both soybean in quantity, but also in area. And this effects increases through time. However, the other groups of municipalities, but they were very small, we do not find any significant effects on them. So if we have a slowdown of deforestation and an increase in soybean, something is happening. So what is this? That's why we look at the other main types of crops and also the pasture area. So what we find is that for some of the crops, there was a decline in their expansion. That's why we argue that maybe the increase in soybean is due to a reallocation, in fact, of the crops. Farmers were doing, I don't know, cassava, and then now they are doing soybean. We also test the effects of the conservation policies on intensification strategies. So we do not find any significant effect on yields. So there was no intensification of soybean related to yields. We do not find also any significant effect on the cropping intensity, but there is a small effect on the stocking rates of cattle. So how to explain that? We can, based on the literature, we emit some hypotheses. So first, maybe there was a change in the production portfolio. So indeed, the environmental policy with the credit restrictions and so on, they increase the cost of access to land. And maybe the new land is also scarcer. So switching to soybean maybe was rational in order to optimize their profits in the new conditions. But also maybe something that could have happened and that was noted in some case studies, people that were going on the fields, was that maybe the economic stress caused by the environmental policy and the increased cost of land could have been an incentive for smallholders to sell their land to more capitalized farmers, and they are often soy farmers. At last, maybe there was a role of the local politics in relation to the blacklisting, because you could exist the blacklist, and some of the municipalities that were blacklisted, they tried to rebrand their municipalities like they were doing green production of exporting commodities. So maybe the promotion of agribusiness in these municipalities favored the development of soybean. So to conclude on this part, the blacklisting was efficient in curbing deforestation rates, and surprisingly, the soybean sector benefited from the policy in terms of land use, production, and exports. And this was concomitant with the shrinkage of more staple food production areas, which suggests a reallocation towards more capital-intensive activities like soybean. And we have some stories to explain why, some hypotheses to explain why this could happen. Something that might be interesting now would be to see whether these conservation policies increase the inequalities between farmers, or, for instance. So this was my first chapter. Then I will just talk very quickly about the two other chapters because they are very preliminary works. So the first one is about the cellular bio networks, their inertia and their link with deforestation. So I was very interested in the previous presentation because it's a bit linked. So I plan to do it during a visiting with Mirko and Paul at the Joint Research Center. Why as the Joint Research Center? It's because they have a team working on imported deforestation. Also because of these new policies of the European Commission on imported deforestation. So why would we? So what is the motivation of this chapter? This is because maybe demand-side policies to combat deforestation could lead to trade diversions, and this would question their net efficiency. For instance, like the European Union, if they ban the commodities containing deforestation, maybe the traders will switch of buyers, they will sell to China, or maybe the producers will change of traders, and this would lead maybe to a reduction of the deforestation footprint of Europe, but without any net effects on deforestation. This is also interesting from a point of view of the economics discipline, because since the COVID and maybe the Ukraine crisis, the research on firms' behaviors and trade adjustments to shocks are quite of interest. So we wonder what are the heterogeneous adjustments of these trade networks to shocks, and whether it could endanger the efficiency of demand-side policies. So for that, we use the trace database, which traces back, in fact, the exports from Brazilian municipalities to exporters, importers, and destination countries. So we have the flows with the production, the value, but also the associated deforestation. So this is a sequence. They can be described as a sequence of 14, because this is through time. 14 weighted because of the deforestation associated with the flows or the value of the flows, quasi-reparted trade networks. And what we plan to do is to quantify the stickiness of this network, because if the stickiness is low, then we can expect the leakages to be high. So to do that, we compute like really easily the durations and the frequencies of the trade relations. We compute also the topological overlap between two dates of the trade relationships. And now the next step is to do a causal analysis to find how shocks, like supply shocks, like for instance draws, could impact those trade patterns. And maybe guided by this observation, we'll eventually try to model the network dynamics with a demand-side policy, but I'm not so sure we'll be able to do that. Then at last, we study the foreign demand permits as a driver of deforestation. So indeed, one of the commodities associated with deforestation is soybean. And why is soybean exported? Mainly to feed livestock abroad. So this is thought to be a driver of deforestation, and we want to assess what is the elasticity of the soybean deforestation to meet demand. Because if it's low, then the policies on diets, on meat diets, would not be so efficient to reduce deforestation. So what do? We use MapBioma, that are the land uses in Brazil, also the trace database to compute the exposure of municipalities to foreign demand shocks, and the BASIT database, which is the bilateral trade flows, and also FAO stats, which are which gives how soybean is used in each country, whether it's for biofuels or whether it's for feed. So we use that to do some regression of the foreign demand against from deforestation against demand for soybean used in animal feed. To have exogenous demand shocks, we built some instrumental variables using Bartik instruments, but this is still very early work, so I can't give you any results yet. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
What was the year where you stopped seeing soybean area increase?
So it was from 2008.
Okay, because you
Yes.
know, with this US-China tensions, after that, during the Trump administration, there was also a big shift of China
Yes,
import from the US to Brazil and Argentina for soy. Was it after?
Yes, it was after. Unfortunately, my data goes until 2018, so it's way too short, but it would be perfect, yes, to see the trade relations and so on.
And I'm surprised to see that there is no strong relation with pasture, because now deforestation is really, the purpose is to do rangeland and pasture in many places of Brazil, much less soybean than before, in the recent years.
You mean in the first chapter when yes, in fact, I think like here we have a decrease in the deforestation and we have an expansion of soybean, but they expand a lot on crops, but also on pasture.
Okay.
So
yeah, because normally it's like a two-step effect. Huh? You have a little soybean
so
just after forest, but you have pasture, and then soybean can arrive after the pasture.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so here there is a catch-up on pasture because of.
Okay, good. But it's still, if you can track back the pasture for which the soybean expand, all those pastures that have been deforested.
Indeed, in I didn't use it that much, but my biomass, yes, it gives really the transitions, and I could have gone deeper in that.
Patrice, do you have a question?
Yes. It's actually a similar comment with Philippe. My understanding of how it happens in Brazil is that there is first rangelands that are not very profitable, but after there are enough, after there are some infrastructure that are put in place, then the land that is suitable for other crops, and in particular soybean, which is given the possibility to export, it's the most important crops used for that. The rangeland are sold to the soybean farmers, such that they can do soy, which is much more profitable. And actually, the fact that they know they will be able to sell those land at a higher price is the reason why there is some deforestation. It's not the only reason, because the rangeland are also somewhat profitable, but it's an important reason. So actually, the fact that there is an inertia and a delay between deforestation and soybean increase is completely in line with this this model that is the future soybean use of land that triggers deforestation based on this on those expectations. And so that was one point. And another is that, from what I've understood, the deforestation based on cattle was actually and more or less by the same people. The big, which is the main deforestation in Brazil, is by big latifundia, big, very big herds. It actually resumed, but in other countries, in the Chacos, in the Paraguay, or in the Argentina, something that is that you don't seem to discuss. So I think maybe you could. It's actually the point of your second chapter, but maybe you could discuss that, the fact that you can. When there is some blacklisting, what can happen is simply people move to other places to deforest. So it's not soybean, but it's for the livestock triggered deforestation.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I agree. I also read a lot that it was a speculation strategy to deforest, then to sell to soybean or to plant soybean on the deforested land. So here in the I compared two groups. I mean, there is the same strategy in the blacklisted municipalities and in the control group. And of course, there is partly this effect of they sell their pasture or they convert their pasture to soybean, to soybean. But there is also, what I try to show is that there is also the effect of converting other types of crops to soybean. And yes, about your second point, here my focus was not on deforestation spillovers, but yeah, maybe I could complement the article with that, or at least discuss it. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. If I understood well, the soybean price also increased, right?
The soybean price, no.
No. Okay, the R with the dollar is not the price in the table.
No, it was not the price, it was the R square. This.
No. The previous one. Yes, this one, the soybean.
Yes, it was like the exports of soybean.
Oh, it's just the export.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, right.
No, yeah, maybe it was not so.
So I have no question.